1960s?
Well, mid-1960s.
Okay.
Gay life in New York in the mid-1960s.
Okay, so let's start that. So keep talking for me, because I'm just going to set audio levels.
Well, nobody really knew anything about it unless you found yourself in the middle of it. It was kind of like a big secret. Like, I always knew that if I wanted to find gay life in New York City in the mid-60s, early to mid-60s, that it would probably, I'd find it in the West Village. So I remember always having to be in the West Village with my parents, and they wouldn't do anything remotely gay. And then one day when I was in art school, I met this magician in Central Park. And I had seen him the night before on the Ed Sullivan Show, this magician. He was like a Dutch magician. And he asked me if I wanted to go out with him. And I was a kid, and I didn't know, like, really what anything to do. So I said, yeah. And he wound up bringing me to the West Village one night. And I remember, like, he brought me to this place, Greenwich Avenue, and I just was like, my mouth dropped open. There was this one street in Manhattan that was like about 4 blocks long, and it had this big prison on it, Women's House of Detention, and some restaurants, and all these gay guys walking around at night, back and forth on these 4 blocks. And if you got tired of walking, you'd lean against a parked car, and you'd watch other boys walk by. And I went, this is where it is, huh? Oh, okay. So I managed to go back by myself one night there and stand in a doorway of a ladies' clothes shop called Carol Blaine, which was a big clothes shop on the corner of 8th Street and like 6th Avenue. And I started to have friends who would also stand around there. But there was always this police presence there. And the police would be like, they'd walk in pairs on the street back and forth. And if they saw you leaning against a car and you weren't walking all the time, they'd stop you and say that you were loitering, and if you didn't keep moving, they would arrest you. So everyone was always walking. It was the only way, like, not to get arrested. And you really saw them carry people away and arrest people. There'd be a truck would pull up right away. So I remember thinking, even surprising myself one night to think that I might just turn the corner here of Greenwich Avenue and walk down Christopher Street. It seemed like a quiet, dark street that was sort of part of the route, and that most people weren't taking, because it got too dark and you couldn't see each other much. I mean, the only people who walked on Christopher Street were people who were going to the very end to this leather bar down by the river called Keller's, and it was scary. It was like, like I was like a teenager. I didn't really even feel safe walking down there, But as the years went by, I realized that I was one of the first people that started cultivating Christopher Street and what Christopher Street meant, and that I could do my thing and stand and cruise and pose on Christopher Street rather than on the open publicness of Greenwich Avenue. Christopher Street was a more private environment, low-key. And that's when I even would go, that's when Stonewall opened on Christopher Street, right around the corner from Greenwich Avenue. And I used to go there dancing,
And then go into the meaning of what it meant to cultivate Christopher.
I thought I was one of the first people to actually cultivate or develop the art of cruising Christopher Street. The whole gay scene was so much smaller, There were only a handful of people who would show up in the West Village and cruise at night in public. A lot of people wanted to go to bars, and they would have these kind of bars all over the city, some in the West Village, some on the Upper East Side, and I just never interested me to stand in a bar in a jacket and a tie, holding a drink and drinking and talking all night. That wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for real physical connections with people. So I felt like I was a pretty much part of the lore, even, of what made people go to Christopher Street. If I started to hang out or just sit on a car or stand in a doorway on Christopher Street, like at midnight, you know, I would meet friends. It would start becoming a social thing. You'd meet other people who you saw cruising or started to talk to, or who had picked you up in that doorway that a week before. And very little by little, like Christopher Street always existed and there had been businesses there, but there were no big gay establishment businesses there. It wasn't like it is now or even 20 years ago, you know? Yeah, I think the Leatherman was always there on Christopher Street. I do. I don't think anything ever changed about them. But they started being almost like on the most low-key, dark street they could possibly find. And little by little, Christopher Street got to be a real mecca. And it used to just make me... I was always like it was incredible to me that off Christopher Street there was a street called Gay Street. Like G-A-Y, Gay Street. It was like, how did they know? You know? I don't know, it was like a kind of safe place to be on Christopher Street, because I thought if my parents ever drive by, or friends of my parents through the West Village, they'd never find me on Christopher Street. They wouldn't see me, recognize me, or report back that I had been seen in this context on Christopher Street, because it was just too dark and untrafficked, you know, as compared to Greenwich Avenue.